process, and no site's been chosen. We haven't applied for permits, so it's early days. As was explained, it is new territory in terms of regulatory issues. There's a lot of attention from it, from the Department of Interior, DOE, and others. But it's breaking new ground. Whereas the potential is very large, it has to function together with the other renewables in California. Gas is renewables' friends. That's the way I'm looking at it. The ramping time for gas generation in California is excellent, and it's a wonderful mix together with renewable. But what I'm missing, to get down to the question, the data that's been available for offshore wind in California has been presented in a couple of studies over the last 10 years. Stanford's been very active in that. Is better data access, so we know the phasing of that resource. Conceivably, it comes more at night, which may be good for charging cars, or at some other opportune time, which makes it mash well with PV, onshore wind, and similar. But at present, we don't have those answers. And so part of this demonstration project will be to investigate the resource, the phasing of it, and try to gain more information in a fairly low cost and optimized way. So we're not there yet, but we're working hard at it, and hopefully we're not too long. We'll be fully funded, and hope we can put some good people here and elsewhere at work, trying to improve the data collection and the analysis of it.
So, good afternoon. I'm Brian Hannigan. I'm the Vice President for Environment and Renewable Energy at the Electric Power Research Institute. You can think of EPRI, as our acronym goes, as effectively the research arm of the electric power sector. All the investor-owned utilities, all the municipal public power authorities, and all the rural co-ops around the United States, and increasingly around the world. We actually have probably close to 500 members in 40 different countries. And everything that we do is based purely on value. There's no mandatory dues. It's all sort of voluntary. If I like the project, I'm going to help fund it. And we look for technology opportunities, similar to what my colleague mentioned here, to find ways in which to contribute resources or engineering expertise. We have about 750 staff, the majority of which are based down the road in Palo Alto, where I am. I've been at EPRI since about 2006. Prior to that, I had I like to say, advanced degree in both engineering and climate science, buttressed by an advanced degree in political science as a virtue of about 9 years at both the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee and the White House Council on Environmental Quality. So to give you a sense of my own background, it's one part science as a climate scientist and one part practical, as one would put in the political sphere. EPRI has been building its renewable energy research over the last 3 years from about a little less than $5 million on a total budget of about $370 to more than $21 million this last year. There's a very large appetite amongst the utility sector for cost and performance information around the generation of renewable energy, the approaches and techniques and tools that one can use to integrate renewables at little to zero cost and little to zero impact on reliability. And increasingly an area that I'm driving, because it's sort of near and dear to my heart, is when you start to develop renewables at scale, what does that mean in terms of other environmental aspects? Land use, certainly we talked about that. Water has been spoken of today. Impacts on species and habitat fragmentation, as John pointed out. Even some of the human effects that have been alleged by various consumers, whether it's turbine noise or whether it's exposures from the smart meters and other devices that emit RF, for example. I've been involved in several of the DOE studies. I was on the panel this morning for the California Energy Future Study. I also participated in the NREL Renewable Energy Future Study, which looked at the implications of an 80% renewables future for the United States. And one of the things that has become apparent to me in the last 3 years as I've focused on renewables, and Jerry, if you could do me a favor actually and click on the slide there. I like to tell stories through pictures, and the one that's, the cursor's right on that, if you can pop that up. We have tried to, as an industry and as a group, I think, look at individual components of the energy system and run to natural gas or run to nuclear or run to coal or run to renewables or efficiency. And I think one of the things that was reinforced by the California Energy Future Study this morning, and I think you can just,
What do I do?
down in the bottom right here, see the little movie projector guy down at the, there you go. Just click on that. One of the things that's been driven home to me as I've focused on renewables this last couple of years is renewables can't be thought of in isolation. In fact, it's part of a big, growing, more complex and more dynamic electricity system. And if you believe the macroeconomic analyses that are out there around things like AB 32, this electricity system transformation that I'll describe in a moment is at the vanguard of a broader energy system transformation. In fact, in most climate studies worth their salt, electricity always decarbonizes before the rest of the economy does, and there's sort of a 1-2 punch to that in terms of getting the carbon out in a more cost-effective way. What's interesting is all the individual technology challenges that I and my colleagues will talk about have to inhabit this ecosystem. Whereas on the right side, if you look at kind of the consumer end of things, you've got electric vehicles coming on board. You've got perhaps, if my friend Mason were still here, I'd give a shout out to dynamic pricing and consumers responding to that, either automated through the devices themselves or by direct customer interaction if they're more educated. You've got distributed energy resources, both PV on the rooftop, but maybe microturbines or distributed generation or fuel cells at the community or neighborhood level. You've got energy storage of various types, both to balance out the quick frequency variability associated when high clouds pass over the solar PV, as well as some of the more time-shifting things that one would want to do from peak to off-peak. And then all of that, as Mason pointed out, has to be measured, monitored. The operators in our control rooms need to have visibility into the vitals of the system the same way that the doctor has a vital sign measurement on the patient. And all of that has got to be cyber secure. And that's a challenge that we've not yet gone about. You see these red arrows on the distribution system of the future? Power is moving two-way on those lines. They were not designed for that. They were designed to have power flow one way, from the generator to the consumer. And so that's a whole new way of thinking about how we operate the system and how we keep it robust going forward. And I know several of my colleagues have emerging technologies and practices that will help with that. And then on the generation side, to the left side of the diagram, not only are we integrating renewables, both large-scale wind and solar, but also some of the base loadables, geothermal, biomass, water power. But we're doing this as we transition the fossil fleet through its end of life with near zero emissions, both of air emissions as well as things like wastewater and hazardous air pollutants of the kind that EPA is looking to regulate at the national level. You've got the question of long-term operations of the nuclear fleet. One of the panelists this morning said, imagine if we took San Onofre and Diablo Canyon off right now in response to current events. That's almost 5 gigawatts of electric capacity that California would not have. You can't just simply snap your fingers and make that happen. You've got to plan that obsolescence and that transition going forward. And finally, one issue that I'll highlight, which we're not really talking about today, but I think goes hand in hand with renewables, is water management. Here in California, we're constantly in drought. Even in the wet years, we're in drought by most accounts. And so water management will be increasingly important. You don't sidestep that when you go to renewables, particularly not for solar thermal, solar PV, biomass, or geothermal. You still need thermal cooling capabilities, be they closed cycle, be they freshwater, be they other sources of water. We're going to continually be pressured as an industry compared to agriculture, municipal, and industrial applications, either people, giving people jobs, or giving people food. I'll argue that our power needs usually come at the end of that long sequence. So the water nexus with energy is very, very significant. Final thing I'll say to you students that are out there, this chart means opportunity. There's a lot of